Welcome to episode 8 of New Media Lab. I am your host, Rob Southgate. Today, I have Jesse Jackson. No, not that one. Jesse Jackson, the podcaster, with me. He's a podcaster for Southgate Media Group, has his own podcasting group as well. He's just all around a great guy to talk to and has lots of great information to share. Please enjoy Jesse Jackson. Jesse, welcome to the New Media Lab. I am so happy you're with me. How are you doing today?
I am doing great, Rob, and I am so pleased you asked me to hang out for a little bit.
You know what? You and I recently recorded a Meet the Hosts episode for your new show, Setlist and Bruce. I had so much fun talking with you, and you have so much history with like podcasting and new media. I thought, you're a natural. You got to be on
Well,
here.
thanks you. It was great having you kind of get us started, and I've gotten good feedback from people who've heard us, and you've also given me an idea that I'm going to expand and do special episodes of Set Listing Bruce, but the Wilco version, or, the Pearl Jam version, or Queen, and have fans that are really big fans of other musical artists and have them on to talk about it, because the show's not just about Bruce, it's about the love of music and how music can inspire you and comfort you. And so I think that's a great thing, and you really helped us set the right tone.
Well, it's a fantastic show, and it's funny because if you hadn't said that, we were definitely going to come to you and ask you to do something like that, because after listening back to it, all I could think, like you mentioned, Wilco, and I know that came up because I'm a huge Wilco fan. All I could think was, oh my gosh, Martha and I would have such great stories about Wilco because we've seen him 20 sometimes and just love him.
And
so yeah,
and I have a couple other friends who aren't big Bruce fans, but they said, in fact, I have a friend named Sarah Hickman, who is a singer-songwriter from Austin. She was on the Tonight Show. She was part of Elektra Records, and she's had this wonderful career. And she said, I don't really have any Bruce stories, though she opened for him once during his non-E Street Band phase. But she didn't get to meet him or anything, but she just did 4 or 5 songs. But she says, I really think you should expand this to set listing music, because, she knows how much I love Brian Wilson, and she says, and you love so many other musical acts. I don't know if you want to focus just on Bruce. And I told her, well, my main focus is Bruce, but I do want to do that. And so she's going to be on the show, and I think that's going to be a lot of fun too.
Oh, that's excellent. So, all right, Jesse, let's jump into this. First of all, I want to hear about your background with new media.
Yeah, so I don't remember when this was, but a friend of mine, Tom Zoller, and it can't be a podcast unless I mention Tom's name. He's an artist and writer, and he's done some My Little Pony books, and he did Love and Capes, which is a superhero sitcom for IDW, and he's currently doing Long Distance. And we had gotten to be friends, and he would come to Dallas for different comic shows, and he mentioned, have you tried Twitter yet? And I'm like, what's Twitter? And he says, well, it's this, that's how old this was. He says, well, it's this kind of, it's this, program or, system where you can send out and, you really can follow creative people. And I think it's going to be really helpful in kind of helping your audience follow along as you're creating, is how he thought it was. And I said, okay, this is interesting. So sure enough, I signed on, and it quickly has become this mass communication tool that I don't think anyone expected it to happen, right?
Right.
I mean, when word got out that bin Laden had been shot and killed, I mean, I think Twitter is the one who did it first, and you're just, the Twitter feed is going crazy.
Yeah, it's famously where the story broke.
And then you have so many sad to say, but celebrity deaths or big news, things go from that. And it's also very cool that you can interact with quote unquote celebrities and famous people. I'm a big fan of Penn and Teller's Fool Us, the show that comes on Monday night on CW, where the premise is magicians are coming on there to try to fool them. The reality is this is a way for Penn and Teller to showcase really good, magic acts.
Yeah, right.
And so, I tend to always find the acts on Twitter and follow them and compliment them, and they reply back. And, I've had some, like Troy Aikman once responded. It was during the Mavericks playoff run. And I said, I've eaten Wingstop every time the Mavericks have won. I need to keep that trend. And I copy Troy Aikman because he's a big Wingstop, ads. He does it. And he replied, I will now, and so,
Right.
so it is just always very cool to reach that. So, I joined Facebook just because everyone else did, and it certainly has been helpful to connect with old friends and kind of keep comments. And new media has really driven why I'm doing this Bruce Springsteen podcast, because much to my wife's confusion, you make online friends. And
Right.
it is, I actually do feel like they're friends and I know them. And so that's kind of very cool, right?
Yeah, definitely. And it is true that I know that we have relationships with people that we've never met,
Yeah.
all because of Twitter.
Oh, absolutely. And you and I have never met, but we met through a mutual friend. I was on one of your con podcast, and then you reached out to me. We told the story multiple times, but you reached out to me to do a Doctor Who podcast, and we've gotten to be fairly good online friends, and I love being part of the Southgate Media Network, and this is something we will meet in person, I think, sooner or later.
Yes.
But for now, I feel like I know you, and I have great affection for you and Martha, and so it's very cool.
We feel the same way. Absolutely.
That's nice. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, okay, your history with podcasting.
Yeah.
When did you get into it? Tell me about that.
I will, and it's kind of interesting. I discovered. I guess I started out with maybe the Firefly podcast or Can't Stop the Signal, and then listened a little bit, and then Kevin Smith's podcasts, and then I found Ron Moore was, when he was doing Battlestar Galactica, he did a podcast after most episodes toward the, I guess, second or third season, and it was a different kind of podcast because he actually went through the episode and talked about what didn't work or why they chose this path. And I always remember, someone didn't like a storyline, and he said, I think that's pretty fair. I think if you want to complain the storyline, that's a fair get. But this is what we were shooting for, and I don't know if we made it. And so it was this, it really was like you were sitting in a living room with him and him talking about the show you're watching.
Yeah, very personal.
Yes. And then I loved tuning into Sci-Fi TV, which is a podcast that's all about just science fiction TV. And I'd gotten to be pretty popular, pretty active on their boards and visiting. And some friends of the podcast decided to do a Farscape rewatch. And they were looking for people who had never watched Farscape to be part of the discussion. And the premise was, like in many of these, rewatches, you have a couple of vets and a couple of newbies, and you watch one episode at a time to discuss it. I had never seen Farscape, so I signed up yes. And so Karen, who now does podcast on this network, and Lou, who just recently was on the 80s reboot talking Stephen King.
Okay. So in other words, he'll be on this network.
Exactly. On the vet, they were vets, and I watched Farscape, and I turned out I really liked podcasting, and I was told, with all modesty, that they thought I was pretty good at it, that I was likable, and I seemed to give good insights. And so I said, okay, this is kind of fun. And then and then I kind of, Karen said, "Hey, I'm thinking about doing a Castle podcast. Do you want to join me?" And I said, "Sure, that sounds fine." And then, of course, you and Martha, asked me to do the Doctor Who podcast. And so I'm now kind of, I do a Game of Thrones podcast for tuning into sci-fi TV, and I do the Doctor Who podcast, and I did the Daredevil with Zach, and I told him, "Hey, I'm open to doing Longmire." So I just love it because it feels like you're just visiting with friends about something you love.
So, did you find it sounds like it was pretty organic how you got into
Right.
it? Did you find that there were any barriers of entry that were holding you back? Like when you first listened to, say, Kevin Smith's show and you were thinking, boy, I'd kind of like to do that. Was there anything that held you back, or was it just you just hadn't found the right people yet?
I hadn't found the right people and the technical end of it. I still want to learn how to edit podcast, and I'd learned to, I like right now you do that for us, and Karen does it for the Castle podcast where Karen edits and she uploads it. So I don't understand the mechanics. I make the joke I'm just the talent. I just show up and talk.
Yeah, right. You sit in the green room until everyone's and make yourself
Yes.
pretty, and then we'll call you in.
And I think that is one of the things that stopped me from doing it. And originally, that's why I wasn't doing, because I've been wanting to do a Bruce Springsteen podcast for probably 2 or 3 years. And I felt, I didn't know if for some silly reason, I didn't feel like I could reach out to you to see if you wanted that on the network. And then, when I thought about doing it myself, I went, oh, I just don't know how to do it. And I think that's one of the things you're doing in kind of some of these discussions and podcasts is you're trying to show people this isn't as hard as you think it is. You can do this. And my wife and I had a really serious discussion a couple of years ago where she thought podcasting was pretty foolish.
Okay.
She said this, and she hates that I bring this up, but my son brings it up to her all the time, where she said, "Who would want to listen to you anyway?" And she didn't mean that.
Oh man!
She didn't mean that ugly. She just meant like she thought a podcast should be from an expert. Like,
sure. No, I get what you mean. I get where she's coming from.
And so I brought up the fact her brother, who's about 10 years younger than her, grew up in the 60s and was teenagers in the 60s, and he played in a lot of bands. He was that typical, 60s, you play at the Catholic Youth Center and you played at school dances, and, he was a drummer. And he talked about, he's now in his 60s, and he talked about a few years ago that if he had his way, he would meet with a bunch of friends every Sunday at a barn and just play music.
Right.
Just out of pure joy.
Yeah, it's not about becoming the Beatles. Yeah. It's about the playing.
Yes. And so I said, "Do you understand that?" She goes, "Oh, absolutely." I said, "Okay." So from my perspective, I don't care if only 5 people hear the podcast. The actual experience of talking about something I love and debating it and enjoying it is fun in itself. And then if I find people enjoy it, so much the better. But the actual doing the podcast is more important than necessarily, becoming, Alan Sipplewall, or Kevin Smith, where.
So for you, you're really saying that it's about the creativity and the interaction.
Yes.
More than the potential celebrity or anything else that some people are driven.
Absolutely. And don't get me wrong, I would love to, find a way to help monetize this, and that, the network was so successful that you actually had to, hire me to help edit things and do things, because extra money to do something you love is great. But this is all about me just having a chance to talk to people. I make a comment that's more true than jokeful. Making your host laugh is the whole purpose of a lot of this, right? You're playing to an audience of 1. And
yes, true,
2.
Very true.
And Dana Steele is a lady, does a daily tip for success. She's from Houston, Texas. She used to be a rock and roll DJ, and she does this wonderful column every day, Daily Tip for Success. And today's was advice she got from a program director that said, you never should say you all of you. You should say you. That when you're doing a podcast or you're doing a talking to a radio audience or you're doing a speech, one-on-one is where it's happening. Even if it's an audience of 1,000 people.
Oh, but you make it intimate.
Right,
you make it for the one.
You, and they will get more out of it. And I think that is, the purpose of the podcast. You want to talk to those people and say, I get that you love Castle, or I know that you love Doctor Who, and I know you may not like this Bruce Springsteen song, and we can talk about it and debate things out of love. I personally, Rob, couldn't do a podcast of something I didn't like.
Sure.
Like I've listened to a couple of Doctor Who podcasts, and they just seem to not really enjoy the Stephen Moffat era, and every episode was them complaining about it. Why quit listening?
Yeah.
Because I'm like, I have enough things going on in my life. I don't need something this right.
Well, this is something very specifically that we discuss around here. Martha and I talk about it a lot. And that is that, like, I don't want to call it a hate culture, but the nerd rage culture.
Yeah.
And we've had people that wanted to do shows, and we're all about creativity. We're all about, like, hey, you want to do this? Let's figure out a way to make it happen. But we've had people pitch shows where the whole premise was complaining about something.
Yeah.
And you make a great point, Jesse. Do I want to sit and listen to somebody complain about something, especially if it's something I like?
Yeah.
I like Doctor Who. I don't want to hear people complaining about it every episode.
Yeah, and that doesn't mean you have to be a cheerleader or
exactly.
There are times when episodes you don't enjoy much. And one of the things that during this off season, Charles and I have gone back and seen a lot of classic episodes, and Charles picked them, we watched them, and a couple of them I didn't enjoy as much. But I said that, well, this one I didn't like as much. I enjoyed this. And, Charles I could see that. I understand why. But if you're just going to sit there and complain about something, quit watching the show. Move on.
Right. People don't need to hear your thoughts about that. Now, I'll give you an example, Jesse. We just finished Under the Dome.
Right.
And that was pretty brutal. I mean, it got to a point where we weren't really liking it. So we made a lot of fun, but we also tried to pointedly point out where we were having fun with it, when it was good, so that the fans didn't feel like we were just bashing it. Because if you're at that point, stop doing it.
Yeah, and I think there would reach a point where you may say, we're not enjoying Under the Dome anymore. And so instead of just having episodes where we talk about why we don't like the show, we're going to quit doing it. Now, what I know, a lot of the things you can do is, and I told I have a friend, Ken, who's not watched Under the Dome. And I said, it just got crazy this past season. And it was so crazy that I enjoyed watching it, just going, how off the rails are they going to go? And, for what it's worth, I think they wrapped it up pretty well, but yes, but that's a difference between hate watching and just going, wow, I don't understand where this is going and what are they doing? So yeah, I can feel that. And, it's bizarre.
Yeah, well, I say it's fine to talk about stuff like an adult.
Yes.
You're doing a fan podcast, be a fan.
Absolutely.
But fans don't love every minute, typically.
And,
they can be critical of that.
And the other thing I really have a problem with is and now this is going to sound like a negative podcast, but the reaction of things before you see it. Ben Affleck being Batman. Oh, that's gonna be terrible.
Right. Everybody complaining about that.
You don't know, and I personally I like Ben Affleck. I think he's a good actor, and I think a lot of this has to do with writing and everything. And I always think of Kevin Pollak saying, no one starts out to make a bad movie. Trust me, all the people involved, everyone wants to make the best movie they can, and then sometimes things happen. And so I want to, and maybe it's the optimist in me, but I look for things to enjoy versus looking for things to dislike.
Right.
Absolutely.
That makes perfect sense to me. So, okay, let's move on from that type of like media criticism to you as a podcaster, you as somebody who's, I'm not going to say you're a newer podcaster because you've been doing this a while, but as somebody who maybe is newer to looking at it more as a business.
Yes.
What do you do as far as strategy for building audience? Do you have a strategy, and do you think about
this?
And is it through social media?
It is through social media, and I also am very, very. I am put off by people on Twitter or Facebook that it seems the only thing they tweet is buy my book, buy my book, buy my book. And then after a while, it's like, okay, yes, I get it. You have a book to sell or you have a podcast to push. So especially with the set listing Bruce, we're just starting out. And I know there is a huge audience, I believe, of Bruce Springsteen and music fans that would enjoy these discussions. So I'm doing the fine line between reaching out to the audience via Twitter and Facebook saying, hey, here's our new podcast. Please check it out and let us know. And also, are you interested in being in the show? I want to have as many Bruce fans, as diverse fans as I can, on the show. So I use social media. I use word of mouth. I bought business cards that for the Doctor Who podcast, and when I was at Dragon Con, I was almost, and this is going to sound horrible, but I was almost the Amway salesman. And God love people who are selling Amway. I'm not criticizing that, but anyone that was cosplaying anything close to Doctor Who, I complimented their costume because let's face it, any cosplay is amazing. And, I would talk to the people as Tom Baker going, boy, September in Atlanta, Georgia, not the best time to be
wearing a big scarf.
Yeah, big scarf and a coat. And they, I know. And I go, by the way, I do a Doctor Who podcast, and I hand them my card.
Very good. So you're doing a very grassroots one-on-one when you're in these situations. That's a great way to handle it. And I think that let's say you were, because yours are more like media things, but even with Bruce Springsteen, you've got this Bruce Springsteen show. You could be at just about anything and doing that if you feel there is the potential for a listener.
Absolutely. And, one of the things I've done is a guy named Peter does a really good Springsteen blog. He Blogness on the Edge of Town instead of Darkness.
I like that name.
Yeah, that is a good name. And so Peter has written a ebook ranking all of Springsteen's albums. And so I reached out to him and said, hey, Peter, here is my new Springsteen podcast. I'd be honored if you'd listen. And I would love to have you on the show. And so to my thrill, he emailed back and he says, okay, I'll check it out. Why don't we do a twofer? I'll interview you for my blog, and then I'll be on your podcast.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Absolutely. I'm trying not to go win.
Right. I hope he's not hearing this.
and one of the podcasts we're going to in a few weeks is a guy named Alton that actually has written a couple of books. And, so he was on and I gave him an opportunity to promote the book, and we talked about his love of Springsteen. And so I look for as many openings as I can find without being obnoxious. And I spent a very long year being an unsuccessful MetLife salesperson. I just wasn't very good at it. But and if you sell insurance, you are always prospecting. You are always looking for someone and something to talk to. Are they going to need insurance, or can you help them?
Right.
And one of the things, and once again, we'll go back to Tom Zoller. Tom is always thinking of how can I market myself and what can I do to get something out there. Let's not wait for one of the big comic companies to come to me. What can I do to get my product out there? And so that's the other thing I think about is how can I get word about our podcast out without being obnoxious and the pushy guy, just saying, because selfishly, or I honestly think it's a good podcast and it's fun. And I also make a point of promoting podcasts I'm not on that I really enjoy, because I it is fun when you find something you love. There's no better feeling than telling someone else about it, right?
Right.
So I think if that's a kind of
So in other words, just get out there and beat the drum.
Absolutely. And that's what you do.
And be honest about it.
And be honest about it. Yes. And the joke is, if you like what we did, tell others. If you don't, tell us. Tell me what you didn't like, or is there something that we could do better? This is, and you're right, I've been doing this for a while, but all of this is subjective, and we're all learning as we go, and we get better. And I think it's all part of the learning process.
Yeah. Now, are there any tools that you use? I mean, obviously, walking up with a card, there's one tool, but are there other tools? Or is there a Twitter tool you use? Is there anything that you go, you know what, this is my favorite way of communicating with people to get the word out?
Yeah, and I'm going to call out someone, and I mean this with love and frustration. There is a podcast that I found called Springtime for Springsteen.
I like that.
Yes, isn't that a great name? And they're two young guys that are not big Springsteen fans, but they've started doing this podcast about Springsteen. And someone said, picture you have two good friends in a car, you're in the back seat, and the CD player is stuck playing nothing but a Bruce Springsteen CD, and they have to discuss it. Okay. So they're really funny, they're really charming, they get everything wrong. They didn't even know the members of Bruce's band, and it was they said Thunder Road was a single at best, and I'm just like, guys, Thunder Road is one of the greatest rock songs of all times, but they have so much enthusiasm, they have so much love. They were great. So I'm driving to Dragon Con, and it's in the car, and I'm listening to them, and at a rest stop, I'm like, I got to find these guys. I've got to find these guys and have them on my show. So I do a Google search. They have no Facebook page. They have no Twitter account. They have a Tumblr account only. And I had to work my little fingers to the bone till I found, because they don't even give their last names, till I found their names in Facebook and sent friend requests to them. And I'm like, guys,
yeah, you're making it really
hard for me. And if I wasn't so obsessed with getting you on the show, I would have moved on. You have to give your audience a chance to give you feedback. And it's so easy to create a Twitter account. It's so easy to make a Facebook page. And yes, it takes a little work if you want to feed it and keep it content. But so that's what I do. I do a Facebook page. I do a Twitter account. I am not very good at web pages, though. I've thought about trying to build that to do a web page, but my worry is if you don't keep new data coming, you're going to lose an audience. And I think that's the other thing you do. You have to keep content coming, unless you specifically tell, like my Castle podcast. We said we're not going to do much this summer. So we hope you guys will come back in the fall. But Charles and I did want to do that with Doctor Who, so we kept things going and moving. So I think you have to make that decision and then gamble that your audience is going to come back. But I think, and it shows if we pull back the curtain a little bit, we get statistics on shows that, what people are listening to, and you can see a drop from when you have, there's new episodes of a show.
Right. When content is there and when it's not, there is a shift.
Yes. And you have to. Now, luckily, Charles is experienced enough in classic Who, and we got that bit of, okay, we're going to have Jesse watch shows he's never seen. And then the past 6 or 8 weeks, we've had different podcasters from other genres join us, and they've picked an episode and we've talked about it. So, it isn't, we've kept it fresh and going.
Right.
So I think that's it. And I think you have to treat this as a fun business. You need to do some prep work. I'm certainly not going to say getting ready for a podcast is as hard as roofing a house in the summer, but you do a little work. I tend to watch the episodes a couple of times. I take notes as I'm watching. It's going to be interesting. Charles has a travel schedule conflict, so the new episode that comes on Saturday night on the 19th, we're going to record right afterwards. So, kind of like when we did Falling Skies.
Right.
You take notes as you're going, and then that's what. Thank goodness you're watching live. During a commercial, you can I'm going to mute that, and I'm going to take a few notes and stuff. And there's a spontaneity that, but normally, we have an agenda. We have what we're going to talk about. We plan on, what we're going to promote. It should sound casual, but there actually should be work behind it.
That's a great point, Jesse. It should. I mean, I tend to be one that likes to jump right in and start recording, but even a show like this, I've got notes.
Yes.
I've done a little prep work. I'm ready to talk to you. And I think that's where some places fall flat. And I want to bring up one more point that you made. I just want to emphasize it. Your guys, your Springtime for Springsteen guys. This is something that I see so often. And I see it not just in podcasting. I see it in business even.
Yes.
Because I've been reaching out to local businesses about sponsorship for something. Have ways people can reach you. You don't have to have every social media platform. Have a Twitter account, have a Facebook page, have an email address.
Yeah, make it.
I mean, I reach out to these companies, and I mean, literally, there are some that I can think of one in particular. They don't even have a phone number on their website. I had to do research to find the phone number for the place. There is nothing else.
And yeah, I have had that experience too, where just recently, a company changed their name, and I didn't know it. There's a local company where I buy. I have a Traeger grill, and so you have to use wooden pellets in there to grill. And I was down, and I went to their webpage, and it wasn't there. Okay. And so I had to spend about 10 or 15 minutes before I finally figured out. And part of this is laziness on my part. I used to be able to do 3 words on a Google search and their website came up immediately. Called the number, placed my order, everything's great.
Right.
Well, that wasn't happening now. And the reason why is they changed the name of their company. And it was only after me researching it, I found on their webpage, we are now doing business as blank. And I'm like, oh, man. Okay. And, how many people are just going to move on?
Well, yeah, that is the key. And that happens even with a podcast or a blog or anything. Rebranding is one thing, but if you don't make it explicitly clear what's going on, a lot of people are just going to drop off. I've seen it. I can think of an example of a podcast recently I was talking to the guy who owns it and runs it, and he said that they switched RSS feeds, and they even went as far as they said for an entire month leading up to the change, they put it on every episode, they put it on all their social media, they put it out there, and they were doing pretty well. And he said the minute they turned that off and went to the other feed, they dropped by 2/3. Wow. And think if he hadn't done that. they did
Right.
all the steps.
Yes.
If they hadn't done that, you're starting over, or you might even be starting at a deficit.
A good example of that is I just talked about Dana Steele. It does the Daily Tip. And she started a month ago saying we are changing platforms that will deliver the daily email to your, email box.
Okay.
You need to go to this link to re-sign up. And she sent that enough that it never got irritating, but you understood. And then I thought was neat. 2 weeks after they had cut off, I got an email saying, "Hey, have you missed us?" The reason why you haven't been getting this is we've changed email services. If you want to get it again, here's the link. And I said, see, that's being smart.
Yeah, that's being on top of it.
And it is, whether you're trying to do this for a hobby or trying to do it for extra spending money, or you're actually trying to make this a career, your business. You have to have passion, and you have to be smart, and you have to understand it takes a little bit of work. And
right. It may be a hobby, but you do want to commit to it.
You want to commit to it because, people like consistency, and they like something that happens on a regular basis. That they get into that habit. I'm a big fan of Penn and Teller, and Penn Jillette does a podcast every Sunday, Penn Sunday School. And he went for a 6 or 8 week, him and Teller were on Broadway, and they banked shows so that every week while he was in Broadway, there was a new show. And they were good shows. They were, some of them, they had Dee Snider, and they had, Jonathan, who does the host of the show, and they had some pretty special episodes, and they said, okay, we're going to be gone in a few weeks, but there will be new shows. We've saved some really great bank shows, and so I kept my feed going, and then every once in a while he'd say, hey, this is Penn, I'm calling in from New York. The Broadway run's going great. This is an episode we had with Gilbert Gottfried. I really think you're going to enjoy it. I can't wait to get back doing shows live. It's going to happen in 2 or 3 weeks, or whatever. He gave a timeline. And
right.
It just, you got to keep your audience informed. And the thing that I stress, Rob, and I think you will agree with me, you should want to do these things. It isn't that I have to do them, it's I get to do them. I want people to find my podcast, and I want people to have fun. So I do this with a sense of joy and happiness.
I love it, Jesse. I think that's probably going to end up being the name of the episode right there.
Well, thank you.
Well, that's it. That's our time for today. But Jesse, again, in the future, we will have you back on.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, and great luck with Set Lusting Bruce, and with Next Stop Everywhere, and with Storming the Castle, and everything else.
And I am so looking to hearing Molly's thoughts about the new season.
Oh, she's ready too.
I am just, I will tell you, if you are not listening to Cuckoo for Who, you are missing it. It is such a joy. Talk about someone loving what she does. And I really appreciate that you and Martha, it's her it's Molly's podcast. You guys take the lead, and she takes the lead, and it's just so much fun. So yes, very excited.
Well, thank you again, Jesse. And just before we go, one last thing. Would you like to give your social media so people can get in touch with you?
Absolutely. Boy, would we have messed up if we hadn't do that. I am at Jesse Jackson DFW. Follow me, and every once in a while you'll see that I'm tweeted some crazy political things, and I always have to remind them, no, I'm not that Jesse Jackson. I'm the one obsessed with Doctor Who and Bruce Springsteen.
Right.
At Set Lusting Bruce is my Bruce Springsteen, and at NSE SMG Next Stop Everywhere is Next Stop Everywhere SMG is the Twitter for our Doctor Who podcast, and we have Facebook pages. And please check us out and let us know what you like and what you don't like. And Rob, this has been a blast. I'm so honored you asked me to join you, and this is an interesting series that you're doing, and I'm looking forward to hearing what other people think.
Well, it was truly my pleasure. Thank you again, Jesse.
All right, bye.
So many great tips from Jesse. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. I could talk to Jesse all day. If you would like to get in touch with me or Jesse, you can send an email to southgatemediagroup@gmail.com. You can follow me on Twitter @rsouthgate. You can also follow the network on Twitter @SMGPods. Until next time, everybody, keep creating.